Hey guys, this is Matt Miller, editor-in-chief of PolitiBrawl, and with me today is PolitiBrawl reporter Richie McGinnis. And we want to tell you guys about our experience doing the Doge Patrol video that went mega viral on PolitiBrawl's TikTok last week. Basically, we went out to a protest here in Washington, D.C. Tons of people, mostly federal workers, or a substantial amount of them were federal workers who were protesting Doge, protesting Elon Musk and the Trump administration. So we had the great idea, I think the very creative idea, to get a Doge t-shirt and Doge baseball cap, a pair of aviator sunglasses, shave down to a mustache, and go out as if we were Doge police officers. My guess was that it was going to be pretty spicy. We were going to get some antagonistic reactions, and that was an understatement.
Yeah, far exceeded expectations as far as getting shouted down.
Yes, it was extremely hostile as soon as we showed up. We didn't even make it through like the first interview before we started getting kind of surrounded by a mob of people. So we want to show you guys some of the clips.
What did you do last week for the taxpayer?
I paid my damn taxes, you
Right.
piece of.
I do pay my taxes.
Oh, good.
So that means that those people work for me.
No, they don't. You pay taxes because no, they don't.
That's how our government works. Yeah, it is.
Okay, so you're a federal employee, right?
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm a guy wearing a Doge t-shirt.
We're a federal worker, just like all the federal workers who are here.
If I was a federal worker, why would I be doing this?
What was your third point?
I'm a team manager, so I manage my team. I oversee all their work. Yeah. Why can't the federal workers give me a list like this? Nobody's giving me a list like this.
Well,
What do they actually do?
Clearly, they should.
The ones who can't, should they be fired?
Who do you? Yeah.
That's all he's doing is spreading propaganda.
I don't know where she was going with that. She thought that I was a federal worker. That just made zero sense to me. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing that if I was a federal worker. But
There's two things that stick out to me. Is number one, the way that she said "effing piece of sh" like with such vitriol.
Yeah.
It really shows you exactly how she felt at that moment, that she realized that you were starting to gain the upper hand in the argument. And actually, by the end of the clip, they're basically agreeing with you that you should, okay, yeah, I just gave you a list. Shouldn't we be able to get that from our workers? And once they realized that they were basically in agreement, that's when they started saying, oh, propaganda.
Yeah, I think they completely melted down and it just didn't have anything else to say. You know, I was not expecting this aspect of it, that sort of venom and hatred is on this issue. You know, to me, this seems like a very logistical argument. You know, how much should we be spending on government? Is our federal government too big? Where are our tax dollars going? I mean, that's not usually the kind of, like the abortion argument. That's very emotional. That's very... There's a lot of intense emotion on both sides. This is one that I was not expecting that for, but maybe because some of these people actually are directly affected by it, so it's a personal thing, that I could understand. But to me, it's a simple question. What can we actually afford in terms of government departments and return on investment? So another thing that I said specifically to this lady and a couple other the protesters was a good metric of should we have USA do this, or should we have this department exist to do this, is what is the return on investment for taxpayers? Is there a measurable result that we can say this succeeded or failed and this was worth the money it cost?
Yeah, and before you get too up in arms about like people losing their jobs, that obviously can be emotionally charged, but they did offer them 9 months of pay. And so I don't know if, you know, folks out there work at a private sector job, if somebody offered me 9 months of pay to leave my job, I mean, that's like the greatest gift that you could ask for. So
it's pretty cushy.
Unless, of course, you're not employable and you can't find a job elsewhere, in which case that begs the question, well, then what were you doing in the public sector?
Yeah.
So, you know, if you can't get a job elsewhere, then what is it that your skills that you're bringing to the table for the American taxpayer? And if the answer is none, then, well, that sounds like waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and I told her that the government, people who work for the government work for the taxpayer. That's another concept that they absolutely hated when I said that, and they disagreed with me. That's not really up for debate. It's an objectively true statement that they work for us. But you can see the level of entitlement that they have too is just astonishing. They feel like they are entitled to a government federal worker, a federal job position, and they don't feel beholden to the taxpayer who's actually paying their bills, and they're not entitled to these things. This is all up for fluctuations in what we can afford, what the American people actually need. This stuff should be evaluated continuously, just like a business would be. If you hire somebody to do something and they're no longer providing value, you can fire them.
Yeah, and if you look at the favorability ratings, Elon Musk is not terribly well liked among the American people, but his mission is. And so the fact that, it's more the messenger that they have a problem with than the actual message. And obviously we've talked about Barack Obama and Bill Clinton's efforts to reduce the size of the federal government, and it wasn't a controversial issue then. So really, I think the issue here is that these people had personal animus towards Donald Trump and Elon Musk by extension. So that's what it boils down to.
Back then, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it kind of a universal thing that everybody agreed the government was so expensive and big and bloated, and it was kind of a race between Republicans and Democrats to who would actually reduce it?
Yeah.
It was more like everyone agreed that, bureaucracy is not great. It's usually not the best way to handle things. If the private sector can do it, it's usually going to do it better. But now there's this religious, zealous loyalty to government, or just belief that government should be as big and powerful and bloated as possible.
And you see the same thing with the foreign wars that are going on right now. It's how is it that the left are the ones now supporting foreign wars? I mean, the whole thing has been flipped on its head. And so people are forced to basically take the ideas that they supported 10 years ago and just flip them completely backwards because Donald Trump now supports those policies.
Yeah.
So that's what it boils down to, is the fact that Trump is bringing it to the fore, and therefore it can't be right.
So you and I have gone out to a lot of these protests now, and we've gone and done interview videos in DC. We've heard a lot of arguments from liberals, from people on the left, against Doge and Elon Musk. In your opinion, what's the most compelling argument against Doge and what Elon Musk is doing?
I think the most compelling one that we heard out there on that particular day was the fact that Elon Musk carries his own government contracts with SpaceX and with Tesla. And so there is certainly some kind of conflict of interest there when he's the one, in charge of cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, and yet that also puts him in charge of effectively his own budget for the companies that he has government contracts with. Yeah. So I do think, examined from that perspective, that's a legitimate question for people to ask, if Elon Musk has conflict of interests there, and how will that be alleviated? But that nuanced conversation is not even part of the conversation right now because of the fact that everybody's so hysterical about the fact that Donald Trump is doing this. And so
well, I guess what is the worst case scenario with that that Elon Musk has conflicts of interest? So what exactly are they pointing at, that he's going to do this, or he is doing Doge so that he can enrich himself?
Yeah, and that concept kind of breaks down when you realize that he's the richest man in the world, and that he doesn't exactly need it. And then obviously he didn't buy Twitter for, to make himself rich. And so he's operating on not just a financial level. He also obviously has certain principles and things that he wants to bring out through this effort. And so, it's the same thing with Trump. It's exactly. They say, oh, Trump, he's just trying to enrich himself and his family. And it's they're pretty rich as it is. Right.
It's so I think for both of them, it's like a loss leader, what they're doing. I think that's why I believe them, and it's one of the advantages of the level of transparency the Trump administration has had. I believe him when he says that he wants to do these things and why he wants to do them, because other politicians, that would be the case. They are trying to enrich themselves. They come in, not millionaires, and they leave office, 8 years later, 12 years later as multimillionaires. It's clear what was happening during their career. Trump and Elon Musk are exceptions to that. I mean, how much money could they make? They're already billionaires. So when they say, look, I want to do this for the interest of the American people, I believe them for the most part, personally. Or at worst case scenario, I think it's an ego thing. Maybe, look, Elon Musk is a businessman. He is a very industrious person. Does he have a vendetta against government bureaucrats? Because a lot of entrepreneurs do. Yeah. I feel like I definitely have a bias against bureaucrats, against people who, government departments who I see as being mismanaged and run completely inefficiently. So But I think that there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of underlying reality there. But I do think that Elon Musk's primary reason for doing the Doge cuts is to actually cut government down to size.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Why don't we queue up another clip? So we can,
let's do it.
Most people in this country voted for Trump.
It's a lie. The slim majority of voters, shamefully, there were very few voters who showed up, but stop that bullshit. It is not a majority of Americans.
It's bullshit.
Do some math.
He actually won the popular vote.
I am telling you, it was a slim majority of voters. Are you hearing me? Because I can sign it if you want. That is why you're not supposed to spread the bullshit that most Americans are looking for this. Because
people care, then they vote.
Because too few people voted. That's a disgrace.
If people care about issues, then they vote.
Yeah, well, if you want
So the ones who cared voted for Trump to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in government.
Because lots of voters were purged from voter rolls before the election.
This sounds familiar to me. It sounds like election denial. Is that what you guys are doing?
Just stop.
Because I thought we weren't supposed to do that.
Just stop.
Yeah, you just told me that. You just said this, right?
You know, the damage that is being done by the narcissist in that building, the people who believe his bullshit. I know gaslighting when I see it and when I hear it, so just stop.
Okay.
Stop.
We don't have to talk to me. I'm actually on my way over here. So.
That one was kind of like an off-topic tangent. It wasn't really about Doge, but you can tell what these people really think about Trump and Trump's supporters.
Yeah, and she's like the prototypical Karen,
yeah.
Which is why I think that video did so well, because she literally looks like central casting for, an old white lady who's angry about the way that things are going. But the other thing, when she told you just stop, when you basically were like, wait a second, it sounds like you're denying the results of the election. People forget, or maybe they don't, especially our viewers, in 2016, it was the Democrats who were denying the results of the election.
Absolutely.
And, saying that Trump wasn't legitimate over and over again. Fast forward to 2020, all of a sudden you're not allowed to do that. You get banned off every social media platform for even implying that it is a possibility. So, I mean, that right there is the irony, is when, they win, then you can't challenge the results of the election. When they lose, then you have to.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's clear that both sides are guilty of that at this point, in some way, shape, or form. But with that lady, what she was trying to say is that a slim majority of people. That's always the case, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like the majority of American citizens vote in every
Yeah, we've never
election.
had over 50% turnout. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that she was trying to say something that's inherently obvious, it confused me. Honestly, I was like, yeah, that's 100% of the time that's what happens. I think one thing that was just clear to sense out there was that these people look down at Trump supporters.
Yeah, that's for sure.
They think that they are better than them. They think that they're more educated, and they have disdain for the. Hillary Clinton was the best. She summarized it perfectly. Just her accusation that they're the deplorables.
Basket of deplorables, yeah.
Yeah, and that sentiment is alive and well, I think, in Washington, D.C. among these people who feel so entitled to their government jobs. It's just a totally different planet that I think they're living on, and that's where the polarization comes from. It's just like two different realities that America's divided into.
And having been in D.C. for 16, 17 years, it preceded Trump. So that aspect of looking down your nose at the flyover Americans, that existed during the Tea Party in Barack Obama's second term. Yeah. I was working in media, and I saw that same attitude, which then was supercharged by Trump coming down the escalator in 2015. So Trump really he's not the disease, he's a symptom. And everybody likes to point the finger as Trump as the sole bad guy. But really, the Democrats handed him that 2016 victory and his 2024 victory on a silver platter, just by alienating their own base, by moving away from being the party of the working class and moving towards being the party of intersectionality and identitarian politics, right, and all of that stuff that obviously Americans it doesn't resonate with them ultimately. And you can only tell Americans for so long that America's inherently racist, is a terrible place. Well, guess what? During Biden's 4 years, there were still millions, if not tens of millions, of illegals coming into the United States precisely because America affords it. us opportunities that other countries don't.
Yeah.
So,
I think the proof's in the pudding that America is the greatest country in the world, and millions of people risking their lives to come here. Yeah, there's so much in what you just said that I think we could dive into. Like, where does this come from that the left basically committed suicide and abandoned the working class?
Mm-hmm.
That was their bedrock. I mean, back in the Kennedy days, they had control of the unions. They had working class Americans were Democrats,
mm-hmm.
and it was aligned. Their entire messaging was aligned. Now that's being flipped on its head.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has capitalized on that. That's why he's a populist, because I think he's digging into those old working class, blue collar messaging strategies. I think they're genuine too. I mean, I think it's the way he communicates that allows him to.
And minorities, for that matter. Obviously,
Yeah.
2024, he got more minority votes than any Republican in 48 years.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned Kennedy. It was under Kennedy and LBJ that they folded minorities, blacks specifically, into their Democratic working class umbrella. They also incorporated minorities in the 1960s. And so, that coalition has existed for 60 years, and it's only a matter of time if you look at American history before the paradigm shifts again.
Yeah.
And so I think the real problem was that, Bernie Sanders got kicked out of multiple primaries, and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden were elevated above him, and they're really members of the uniparty, and they wanted to keep the gravy train going as it was. And so that circles back to all the resistance that we're seeing right now, where Trump is trying to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, and that's viewed as a Trumpian thing now. So,
well, one thing that is being lobbed at the Trump administration right now is that he's cutting corners.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think that's how I would put it. He's cutting corners.
That's a fair, yeah.
He's trying to accomplish things like deportations. Now, look, I think the urgency and fast action on deportation, in my view, is justified because of what Biden allowed to happen over the last 4 years. It's like, if we give everybody due process, which is an amazing ideal, I think that that's going to take way too long. We're not actually going to accomplish. But so what is Trump doing instead? He's cutting corners. He's just like rounding them up and shipping them out to El Salvador. So is that going to come back to bite us? Same thing with the Doge cuts. Like, is this a dubiously unconstitutional way to make federal cuts? Maybe, maybe not, but it's not clear-cut legal. So, yeah, is the way that the Trump administration is cutting corners going to come back to bite? We'll see.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait for the midterms and see what happens.
class
But ultimately,
elections.
Americans do support the mission of cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think, like, those protesters told you everything you need to know about the approach that Democrats have. It's like, you can't just pretend it's not happening. You can, but only for so long. And we've gotten to the point now where it's so blatantly obvious that it's not tenable.
Yeah.
And that's why it got shouted down.
So, what are our plans for going forward? I guess, we've talked a lot about this in the office. We want to cover more of these sorts of protests, obviously. I mean, this kind of content, not only is it interesting, it's inherently interesting, it performs really well across all platforms, and we want to be the outlet that actually goes to the front lines of where these debates are happening, not necessarily pre-scripted, short soundbite sort of content. So you guys are going to get a lot more of this. One thing we were talking about is going to Columbia University. There's obviously a huge cultural, societal battle occurring there, a clash of ideas. And, addressing the Mahmoud Khalil situation, real quick, that's, this Columbia student is in the country legally on a green card, but he has allegedly distributed Hamas supporting propaganda, flyers. He's a big leader, organizer of the protest movement that in some instances has gotten out of hand and been destructive. So anyway, the Trump administration is going to deport him. They've arrested him. And a lot of the students there are now protesting this deportation. And so, yeah, I think that's where we want to go next and kind of examine that whole situation.
Yeah, I definitely stay tuned out there, folks, because we're going to be out on the ground and debating it, on the streets, where ultimately that's the town square. That's where the ideas are really being battled over, not in the cable news studios, where, obviously those well-paid hosts are keen on having their conversations. But They're not actually, interacting with the average everyday Americans who are out in the streets.
Or the ones who care enough to go out in the streets and whatever they're doing, whether they're being peaceful protesters or otherwise, those are the people that are the most passionate, the most committed to these causes. So they should be the best prepared to answer questions, simple questions.
In an ideal world.
Yeah, not always the case. But yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. We're going to be bringing you guys plenty more content like this. Thank you so much for watching this short installation of the PolitiBrawl podcast. We're going to be doing lots more of these too, so stay tuned to Substack, stay tuned to the YouTube channels, PolitiBrawl, PolitiBrawl News, and PolitiBrawl Daily. Thank you guys for watching, and yeah, that's it.
See you on the flip side.